Well, one of the, let's see how to say, one of the first experiences that we have upon incarnation, whether it's pre-verbal or after we have language, is an experience of not having safety or acceptance in our natural, authentic expression. Oftentimes, upon incarnation, an infant or even a toddler will be in circumstances where they are now paying more attention to the external, whether it's mom and dad and siblings, family, or maybe playmates or whatever, than they do to what's going on with them. Because what's happened is that they've begun to realize that what they want depends on those others, looking like mommy and daddy and siblings and friends. And so what happens very quickly, in fact, I don't think we ever have any experience or access to authenticity until we do what we're calling and what we're all together in order to experience until we wake up. And waking up to true nature opens the door into authenticity. The reason that it goes so quickly is because our authentic expression, it will not get the what we are wanting. And this is a generalization, but it's accurate. A baby cries because they want to get fed, and mommy has decided to feed them on a Dr. Spock schedule or whatever. And so they're not going to get fed for another hour. So what they wanted was not considered by out there. They may then conclude that if they don't cry or if they don't make a fuss, they may get something sooner. What we start to do immediately is try to figure out how to navigate the external environment, looking like other people and circumstances, so that we can get something that we want. And so what we give up in order to do that is our natural, authentic expression. When we start to become aware of this, we are already, we've already created an entire persona of who I believe I am. I'm a good person. I always consider others first. I try to be polite. I've come up with an entire facade and expression that is not the expression of authenticity. And the reason is for what I pointed to. When we give up all possibility of authenticity, as our attention particles are magnetized into an external where we have to navigate, where we have to be alert to what other people are feeling, and we begin to be externally referenced. So that's the end of any possibility for authenticity. And like I said, I think all of us would have a sense of how soon it happened for us. It's most often pre-verbal. It's an experience of attention particles. Mommy and daddy are fighting. If I start laughing and being a cute baby, then they stop, their attention comes here. And so I began already with an adaptive, asserted identity of being cheerful and happy in order to keep things good out there. When we wake up out of our identity that we've been living out of, the projected fear-based, I'm not good enough, whatever that distortion field that got created with the early wounding, when we start to wake up, we start to value our own authentic expression. We start to realize that the frequency of that authenticity is a very high frequency, and that it operates at a high frequency that makes available connection and makes available an arising of a reality that we want. When we've been me, the ego mind identity is always transactional because it started in those early experiences that I was just pointing to. So when we couldn't get what we wanted until we got to be cheerful and made other people laugh, or we could do our most recent dance routine from the dance class we're getting to
Oh,
take.
there it goes.
What was that? Sorry, someone is not muted. Hold on. No problem. All right. Yeah, so the is this making sense to everybody? I can't see things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can kind of recognize that early experience of our alertness and our awareness to the external, because we experienced that we needed the information out there in order to both be safe and to hopefully get some of what we wanted. And we created adaptive behaviors on behalf of that, to try to be entertaining, or to try to be valued, to try to do what mommy wants so that she will get me the new shoes I want, or so that she will pay more attention to me than she does baby brother. It's like, there are all kinds of motivations that are not recognized as information by the child, but that are just instinctive, with attention particles out towards the family, towards the siblings, towards the friends. Then they're getting information. We're very good at just concluding what that means when she looks like that. So we are taking in this information, and then we are trying to shape our response to that so that we get what we want. It makes total sense. And it's a part of the incarnation into looking like separate body-mind units that are running around the planet. And we've got all of these that are very close in with us as our family. Once we've gotten into the habit, excuse me, of noticing what's out there and then determining how to be so that it best serves us in our terms of our interaction with which is out there. If it serves us to be quiet, then we'll become a very quiet person. If it serves us to be extroverted and show up and entertain, then we'll become that. And we'll do it based on our talents and abilities that are part of the incarnation vehicle, right? Mm-hmm. We'll have inclinations, we'll have ways in which it fits best for us. Now, often those do get squelched early on, so that later on, when we start to come around to being on our own behalf, we realize that we would have been happier if we'd been more self-expressed, that we had squelched ourselves in ways that were not natural to us. So with the acquirement of adaptive behaviors, and all of these are on behalf of, again, dealing with an external, and the external is already a projection of what I early concluded about myself. And this is where the 6 steps comes in. We have a lens through which we see the external, looking like mommy and daddy and siblings and friends, and we see them through something that may have gotten installed prenatally, or during the birth process, or very early on in our being cared for as an infant, our neglect as an infant. And so there's already a distortion field. And now we are seeing what we think is the family, the others, and we're making conclusions about how we need to be in response to that. And that's what starts to create the adaptive behavior that creates what I think of as me. And that's the creation. Fundamentally, those are the specifics of an ego identity. Now we're dealing with a world that we see through our woundedness, I'm not good enough, and we navigate that world through our adaptive behaviors of entertaining or avoiding or whatever our adaptive behavior was. But for sure, what none of us is doing is authentic. it's impossible that there be an authentic expression of who I am seen through a distortion field of my own wound. I'm not good enough, and experienced with the early externally referenced conclusion about how I need to be in order to deal with out there. So that's a kind of a picture of the dynamic that goes on as we move into this incarnation and start to navigate it. The real problem, and there is one, the real problem with this is that the frequency that we create out of on behalf of our adaptive behaviors, being the good girl or making good grades or always being on time, whatever it is, that plus our wounded conclusion, I'm not good enough. The problem with that is that we have neglected, we've turned away from ourselves, and we are magnetized into the external. And now it's all of the information that we take in order to decide what we want, how to behave, what gifts and talents to pursue. All of them are now in the distortion lens of both the wound and the adaptive behavior. So we're way out of kilter in terms of our authentic expression. The problem with that out of kilterness is that the frequency of that is fundamentally fear. We're afraid if we don't show up in the way that we concluded very early on, like being cheerful or being entertaining or being in the shadows, being not noticed, with our wounded conclusion, I'm not good enough. The combination of all that has put us into expression through a frequency of fear. Now, just to complicate matters, which we always, because this is not simplistic by any means, it is simple, but it's not simplistic. And to complicate matters, this whole entire identity issue is on a polarity. So sometimes we get the reward of being cute and funny or being in the shadows or whatever. And the other end of the stick is that we get the ignoring or the dissing that comes from our behavior. So we're caught on a stick of polarity, and that's what creates a lot of confusion. But the underlying frequency of that stick is fear, because it's based on the need to get something from out there, or to at least not be seen from out there as being less than. Is this making sense to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so when we start to come home to ourselves, we're leaving a frequency of fear, and it feels risky at first, because what we talk about early on in this awakening process is, what does it mean to be on my own behalf, right? That's something we've never even, it's never been a part of the equation, because what we felt we had to be was alert and aware of what was required out there. And that's what we based everything that we expressed. We may have often experienced, I can remember experiencing as a child, feeling like, it seems a little bit mature for a 7-year-old, but it was something like, there's no chance for me to be who I really am. You know, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. It's not going to work. So I, in my own inclination, what I was attracted to, because this was way back when, was it's time with the radio shows that I loved. I remember Mr. District Attorney on Sunday evenings. That was always going to be my go-to. And also books and being alone, because it was in that space that I felt best. I didn't feel pulled into what I've been describing. And all of us have our adaptive behaviors. Either we can be alone, we can be with friends to be distracted and not experience what we believe. But there's a lot that goes on in all of that. And we come away, we never come away totally, but we end up in our lives acting out of the distortion field that was the wound, and with the behavior of inauthenticity that was an adaptation to what we thought we needed to express. Is this, yeah. So when we start to wake up, one of the things that we do in our Sangha is to start to realize when I'm not being on my own behalf. When it's not moving towards authenticity right away. It's just the first step to seeing what is it that I'm wanting to experience, that when I don't express myself, I don't get to experience. What is it in terms of intimacy or connection that I would love to have that I feel blocked because if I express authentically, I don't think they would like me or be attracted to me. So we have all of these limitations that come about from these conclusions, and that come about from the patterns that we have learned to move through reality, held by limitations that are only in our sense of who we are and our projected reality that's seen, perceived through a distortion field of, for most people, this does not say you need to be a certain way to be accepted. They're not accepting you. There's an entire distortion about the nature of reality that comes from what I've just described as my sense of what is pretty much the universal experience of incarnating into this 3D polarized reality. Authenticity is the highest frequency for the body-mind unit. When you come home to authenticity, you can only come home to authenticity when you truly, truly don't give a shit. That's the key. That's it. Right? But you only get to not giving a shit as you come home to yourself, knowing that you are all that is. You are everything. Right? Come home to your true nature. Like I am the love and the light of this reality that I experience. And I know who I am. I am the awake awareness in which this reality arises. And from that place, that identity, it's like you have reclaimed all of your attention from out there, right? Which gives you the true north experience of your attention particles back here. And from this place, it's like you are, the frequency of authenticity is available to us. It's available to say, that doesn't work for me. It's available to us because we no longer have any self-judgment. And as we know, when we give up self-judgment, all the judgment falls away. So we're free to express in easy and loving ways without concern for results, right? So it's coming into authenticity is the possibility. And we will actually we'll know it for the first time because it was so obfuscated, obscured back early on for most people in infancy. So when we come upon it, it feels so free and light because it's the light that shines on accurate, non-self-judging expression. The frequency of that creates a new reality. The frequency of authenticity is the frequency of love. It's the frequency of self-regard, the frequency of valuing oneself as all that is and available for connection, available for authenticity. The authenticity is such a freeing expression ongoingly that we start to relish it. It becomes its own reward, and it is truly that. We will come to authenticity as we wake up to who we are and let go of the limited fear-based identity. I'm not good enough, I don't matter. And we come to this place of true nature and authenticity through seeing, using the 6 steps, that's what we use, to see what the distortion field is, what the limitation is, and noticing that we begin to tell ourselves the truth. I begin to say, no, I don't want to do that. When before, out of my adaptive behavior, I would have felt imposed upon to say yes to whomever asked me, whatever, right? So we come home to being on our own side, realizing that it's not against anybody else. It's for the one I am, which I only make my contribution in this reality, into this reality, as I come into authentic self-expression. It's a high bar, but it correlates exactly with waking up to true nature. And so we don't have to try to create it, but we can see what's keeping me from that. Notice what's keeping me in an adaptive behavior. Is it because I didn't feel free to say no when I was 5 years old? You know, I always believe that the 2-year-old cycle of the no's, which we're all familiar with, is on behalf of trying to get to this without going through a whole lifetime of shit, right? That the 2-year-old is like, I need to say no, right? But that's pretty soon is squelched, and then we're moving into an adaptive behavior of being the good girl, of saying yes when we don't want to do something, and feeling like the nature of reality, the way of this incarnation, this world is against us. It'll never be for me. And that's the experience of our inauthenticity, because we're never for us until we come home. And as T.S. Eliot says, return home and know it for the first time. That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pali.
Yeah, lovely.
So open the floor for 6 steps or contributions of any kind.
Either on Zoom or in the room, anyone? Questions or challenges with your authenticity?
Mine isn't really a question, more like just an observation, being this awake awareness. I'm noticing how I've adapted to a pattern to make it feel safe in relationships and not showing my authentic true self because it was shut down in the past. Yeah, it's just really, really interesting to observe myself and realize I can let go of that now. And if it doesn't fall on whoever, then that's okay. It's just not a match, like for whatever reason, there's a lot of other people in the world, so yeah, it's pretty freeing.
It's absolutely freeing, because that's the freeing up from the distortion field. That's the beginning of choosing yourself and risking that, even though I may believe I'm not good enough, I'm still choosing authenticity. I'm still choosing to express what's true for me and taking the risk. We couldn't have taken the risk as little ones. It was way too risky. It would be risking everything in terms of what we perceived we needed to do about out there. So we were caught in that, and that proves true throughout schooling and all kinds of collective conditioning that we get from groups, from church, from school, from others, right? And we just keep meeting the pattern. We keep lining up. We keep out of our own need to be safe. We are kind to ourselves regarding this shift because it was scary. We did the best we could.
So Polly, we've run into this a couple of times. When we think we're saying no or yes out of our authenticity, but it's actually an adaptive behavior, right? So can you give us any guidance on discerning that, or is it just a process of learning? And
It's probably gonna be a process, sort of a process of elimination in sense of what the outcome is. But typically, if you start to get in touch, and this often happens through meditation, you start to get in touch with what feels like, I call it true north. It's like a compass. It just feels like it's correct. And often initially, the way to authenticity is, like I said before, which is part of what the teaching is here, which is to start to be on your own behalf. And being on your own behalf is really scary sometimes. And you may make mistakes sometimes, but it's all clarifying and it's all in the direction of authenticity. Yeah, the being in touch with what's true for one can be a slippery slope for a while. The human design is helpful to see what your authority is and where you can actually get in touch with your genuine response.
Robin, do you mean that the apparent authenticity is sometimes in service of the ego?
Yes,
Yeah, and so that's what you mean, Polly, that we just have to kind of do our best and try, even though it may be in service of the ego. It may be an
Yeah.
ego taking a stand.
Right, and it is, there is the phrase I use is to try the spirit. I don't, I think it won't pass the smell test if it's in service to the ego. It's, I mean, we have necessarily fooled ourselves for many years, but we also are becoming much aware because there's more light now. There's more light of the one I am shining, and it's, yeah. Feel what it feels like. I don't think you'll be fooled very often.
well, but sometimes I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Mess with you a little bit here.
Sure.
Because sometimes it feels like, well, I'm mad and my anger is authentic.
Right,
I believe that, but that's actually a trigger. I'm believing a
yeah.
trigger rather than,
Mhm,
and I think my anger is showing me to be on my own behalf.
mhm.
When actually, if I worked the 6 steps,
That's
I might have a whole different.
Yeah, you
perspective on
would,
it.
because, I mean, I don't like to make some overarching rule about this, but typically, in most cases, anger is a secondary emotion to a trigger, to being hurt, to having some other experience where you felt threatened, and the anger comes up in protection and defense. So it's always to be looked at one level deeper.
So could we say, it is until you clear the trigger, you can't really be on your own behalf, that the trigger is in the
for
way
sure.
of being on your own behalf.
Yeah, the trigger is your direction to notice what distortion lens is in place, right? This is why I discourage, I was gonna say I prohibit, but I discourage solving the problem at the level of the problem, right? I mean, what our tendency to do is that if we have a friend and we're having a conflict with a friend, to say, can't we just work this out? I just want you to, if you can just not yell at me like that, right? Or whatever. And then I'll try to be more aware of this. And we work it out at the level of the problem. And so we leave the trigger behind. But we can work it out at the level of the problem and let the trigger do its work to help us see what the distortion field is, because that's where clarity comes in. That's where your reality changes, not in this lateral kind of exchange with a friend or lover or whatever, teacher, whatever.
So here's a potentially an example. Let's say, I told you I just went to that wonderful retreat and
Yeah.
had so many, because the greatest place to be during the election, and there's so many wonderful things.
Yes.
So part of me, wants to share some of those, but also knowing as a little girl, I got a lot of kudos for being smart and being brilliant and all that. So kind of knowing the difference when I wanna share something like about this. That metaphor of the sky that was so wonderful for me at the retreat. The sky and the clouds going through the sky, but the sky was still the sky.
Right.
And it was so profound to me. So how can I really know when I wanna share something that it's from this other place than that place? Cause it doesn't feel like it's from that, oh, look how smart I am place. It feels like, it feels different.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think that's the litmus test right there. I used to say, with this question, to try the spirit of your motivation. But that whole thing is like, this is our Sangha, this is where we share like that, and to trust it, right? And to trust it, that if you have something to offer, that it will be received and appreciated. If it's sort of a smell test, you can sort of smell if there is a need to be valued, if there's a need to be appreciated, a sort of lurking under there. That still doesn't mean that you shouldn't share it. It's just to be aware that that's still maybe a little part of the motivation.
Well, I think, it's from like a excited, passionate place as opposed to a look at me place.
Right.
And I could get that.
Yeah. We want you to share, Patricia. We want to know everything you learned at the retreat.
It's hard to talk.
Where were you?
Oh, with Gil, at
Oh.
Inside Retreat Center.
Yes.
I'd never been there before, it was
Yeah.
extraordinary,
Good.
yeah.
So Polly, I have a question for you about authenticity, and you said to me once, you can't do authenticity
Right.
to wake up. You can't,
Mhm.
that authenticity, or you are authentic in the waking up. Or
That's right. Yeah, authenticity is the nature of the awakened state. It's a big component of it, right? Because there's no longer a fear-based me there who needs to get something or avoid something. And then you're just in self-expression. You don't have any attachment to how it lands, for one thing. It's like, take it or leave it. It's like, but the authenticity is a part of our true nature. But we can't try to be authentic, yeah. It's not something that you can do. It is something that you already are when all of the other distortion fields are cleared, when you're no longer seeing reality and others through a belief, I don't matter, I'm not good enough, that authenticity is present. Yeah, that's powerful.
I have to say that I am so grateful for the work that we do here, because it's a personal thing with Amora and me and this woman from California who made this movie of me called The Legend of Lily, which made me throw up. And
The Legend of Lily?
The Legend of Lily, and it just like
Nice.
mortified me to the extent that I would never let her release it. And also because I sent it to my WASP children, and they did the super WASP thing, which is, we will never speak of this again. So that was, 20 years ago, so I would never let this thing out just because of its mortification. And I said for this birthday, I don't give a damn now. Go ahead, put on the damn movie.
Right.
I don't care.
I watched the whole thing, Leila, it was
Did
great.
you watch it?
Absolutely.
It was fantastic,
You
Lily.
know what? It surprised me that I was so awake back then, because I forgot a lot that like I was there years ago. What the fuck? Where did I go? I felt like I was, this is my metaphor for now, it's like, there's a beautiful piece of coral in the ocean and the silt covered it all up. Until the big fire last year when everything broke loose. And I had this fast track activation happening, and now I don't care. It's like, thank you.
Lily's
Thank
87,
you.
for those of you who
taking
don't
a
know
lot of
Lily.
credit to you for this.
We have to get the Zoom link. You could say.
Yeah, I wanna see this.
No, I think,
It's on, I have its own YouTube. They put
Yeah.
there is a YouTube Lily Townsend Minister Fund on there, so it's all out there.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the chat in case anybody wants to
Yeah.
look at Lily 20 years ago when she was 67
Mhm.
or something like that.
well, those pictures of you on the cover of that magazine, Lily.
Yeah,
I didn't
baby.
know that.
I know, well, it was pretty funny. My own mother did not recognize me on the newsstand. She passed right by. So,
Oh, my God.
and it's so funny.
Okay.
Yeah, free to move around.
Okay, people want your movie, so let me put this in here.
Yes.
So it's Lily,
Lily Townsend, YouTube Minister Fund.
The Legend of Lily.
Yeah, please. We're legend of fucking Lily. Please let go.
Legend, Lily Townsend, YouTube,
Just my name is in. that.
Minister of Fun.
Yes. Yeah, please don't put.
That's the
minis-
link.
Put the legend on. It's like,
But
And
if
she
we do,
also-
will we find it?
call me the legend, and then she called me Miss Generosity, and I thought. Wow.
Well, you are Miss Generosity, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true.
I like how your kids said we'll never speak. Oh my God.
It's the ultimate response to life, which is why
That's
I'm
right.
here. And why I know that I needed to be activated to start feeling. Because I was trained not to feel. We're going above this. We don't deal down there with the messy stuff. And now I'm in the messy stuff and I really like it. Just wonderful.
Oh, my God.
I just want to check in with the Zoom, been quiet over there, just, I know everybody's watching Lily's video now. But anything out there in the ethers, that you would like to share or work on or questions? Katie, are you preparing to unmute?
Well, I was very much thinking about how are you how do you act on your own behalf? And who is the one acting on your own behalf? Because it would seem as if you could only be in touch with awareness to act on your behalf. Otherwise, you're acting, as we were saying, in response to the little me that's running the show. And so I just was thinking, you made a comment at one point in the class, like, oh, probably she's never asked for something on her own behalf. And I thought, yeah, that's probably true, because I don't, I don't have an authentic, if I have an authentic experience of myself as awareness, I'm not needing anything really. I would just be being.
That's true, Katie, but you have to get there.
Yeah,
You can't be it before you've gotten there. And the path to getting there is to reclaim our attention from out there. And out there is going to look like expectations of other people and the need to be a certain way, whatever our conditioning was. And so it's in clearing that up that we actually find ourselves already present as awareness, right? So all of that has to be seen, and it's alchemy. It's the alchemy of waking up. Is the light of awareness shining on something. This is what happens with the 6 steps. The light of awareness shines on the distortion that was installed with the early conclusion. I don't matter, or I'm not good enough. So there is the path back to awake awareness is to undo or to see through all of these obfuscations that we have mounted and our need to be safe, to be loved, to be included, that we project onto the external. So becoming aware of that, then there is the experience of the awareness, which is what the 6 steps takes you to. And I'm not that limited being, right? And from that place of awareness, you can still have a desire to have something or to create something or to connect with something. But it's not fraught with rejection. It's not fraught with self-rejection, which is typically what the ego wants to have something, connect to something, is so that it overcomes its experience of its wound. So the motivation starts to be different. But getting in touch initially with just what's true for me, I don't want to talk to them any longer, then you don't, right? You trust what you're wanting to be information that's on your side, which you've probably never, for many people, that's never been an equation. The idea of my preference, and within that, it got pushed out early on, when our attention particles went to the external. So I know it can feel like a slippery slope, but in order not to overthink it, we just stay with ourselves. What do I want to experience? What do I not want to experience? And start to just come home. It's like reclaiming your attention particles from out there where they've been projected, looking like other people who clearly in our distortion field have an opinion about me, right? Clearly, they don't want to include me, they don't like me, whatever, but that's the distortion field. And so as we do the work with the 6 steps and clear it, then we can just simply be on our own side, say what's true for us. That's the move towards being awake and knowing yourself as the awareness instead of as the victim, as the person who doesn't get what she wants. Does that help?
Yes.
We-
Yeah.
You know, Polly, I'll say something that you helped me with a couple of years ago. With an incident that happened with a friend who I felt kind of violated a professional boundary, showed up at a retreat I was teaching uninvited, blah, blah, blah. And I felt violated somehow. I felt like it wasn't okay. And I talked to you about it and we worked with it. And it felt like being on my own behalf was actually saying something to her about it, which I did. I said something that caused a real kerfuffle. Even though I thought I was mindful about it and I thought I did it, taking responsibility. That whole process lasted probably 6 months because I must not have said it in a way that she could hear. She pretty much stopped talking to me for a while, then she came back and worked it out, blah, blah, blah. What I saw eventually was, oh, if it happened now, I wouldn't need to say anything. Because that in me, that got triggered then, was a conclusion. You know, this isn't okay, I'm getting violated, who's getting violated? It's an old identity. Now it would be, oh, okay, I see I'm triggered. And I would work with the conclusion of it. And I'd see that there's no working it out with her.
Right.
There's that the answer is not out there.
Exactly. Brilliant.
Because no matter what she told me, which she did eventually tell me, I'm sorry, it didn't help. No, it didn't help the conclusion until the conclusion was seen and felt and forgiven.
Yes.
Nothing out there would have helped
No.
dissipate it.
And our motivation to represent ourselves in that way with the apparent other,
Yes.
right, is to represent ourselves, to be right, basically.
It was, and I don't think there's anything I could have done 3 years ago, except that.
Exactly. It was perfect.
That felt authentic,
Yeah,
and it felt like on the way to this,
yes.
yes.
So, because I've really watched you work this over the years in incredible ways, so. What I'm hearing was there was an asserted identity at that point, and it felt like that asserted identity was being on your own behalf.
It did,
Exactly.
it really.
In a very righteous way.
Correctly.
I tried not to be righteous, but I apparently was.
But, you know, it was like there was you'd been wronged.
That's right, I've been wrong.
Yeah.
And I really felt like I was right about being wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, you were.
Thank you. And then you wanna keep.
Well, yeah, just like the asserted identity fell away.
It just did,
It did.
Doing the 6 steps, it just fell away.
it did.
And you don't do that in a lot of different ways. You don't do
No,
that anymore.
I don't do that anymore because I get it.
Yeah.
There's no working it out there. I finally, with Polly telling me that enough. And me trying it multiple times, even with Matt, my husband, something comes up. And and then I realize, no, forget it. There is no working it out there. It's me.
Yeah.
Getting triggered and I have to deal with it.
That's brilliant because you have sole access to that.
I do,
You don't to the other.
no,
We think we can do something out here, right? And it can make a difference. But
right,
unless this clears in here, out there is a projection. It's a very
It is.
radical way to live. But I mean, we can say, I understand out there's a projection, but living that way?
So
It's
what would
intense.
you do now? How would you handle it now?
well, so here's I'll answer that in question, but my question is, one of my retreat students said to me a couple of days ago, I disagree with you that there's no blah, blah, blah out there. What about heartfelt communications between people?
Mhm.
And I thought, I didn't really answer that. Thank God it was at the last question of the retreat, and we were overtime and I didn't have to. But I thought it still wouldn't solve what's the conclusion. So that's what my answer would have been. It wouldn't have unwounded the wound. The heartfelt communication would have just been sort of another version of,
That's right.
I love you, but I don't like it when you do that.
That's right.
And in
And
order
you actually expressed that to her.
that time
In
that I
that
did
time.
that, I
That's
did,
right.
I love you, but I don't like
That's
it when I
right.
did that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, so hang on 1 second before we go there. So is it, what we're seeing here
Oh,
is
that's right,
a
sorry.
wounded identity? No, are we seeing a distortion field meeting a distortion field?
Yes,
Mhm.
that's
Yes.
what it usually
Oh,
feels like.
Exactly. That's right.
Conclusion meets conclusion,
That's right.
Yeah.
which is another way of saying
Yes.
conclusion and wounded identity and distortion field meets conclusion, wounded identity, distortion field. And so then 2 distortion fields are trying to work it out.
That's right.
Hopeless
Yeah.
is what I finally realized. We're just dealing, like I have on a pair of etched yellow glasses, they have on a pair of etched red glasses.
That's right.
And both of us are trying to see clearly, and we can't until we take our glasses off.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how it
Beautiful.
goes. Did that answer your question? Kind of, but not really.
Well, I want you to go back to the incident and see where you got pissed off or outraged.
I got pissed off because I felt like she done me wrong. That she had not been invited to that retreat. She showed up unannounced and uninvited, started talking to all the students. It felt like an intrusion of the space. Now,
What
that
would you
doesn't
do
mean
now?
I wouldn't have now said something to her, but about, I think the difference is that I wouldn't have been triggered. I would have
Exactly.
thought,
That's right.
I wonder what was going on. There would have been curiosity,
Yeah,
there would have been wonder.
yeah.
I would have liked to hear from her what was going on, with her. I would have been much more interested
Right.
instead of harumph. I just wouldn't have felt like a rooster crowing about my son.
Would you let her in coming into the retreat?
And I didn't have any say of that. She was there after, she came in after I left. I went home for lunch and she showed up. So I would have found out as I did after the fact. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is a lively discussion. And we're just about to go into meditation. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.